I remember the exact moment the message appeared on my phone. I need a break to figure myself out. No contact. I didn't respond immediately. No panic, no impulsive reaction. 2 years together didn't dictate my next move. This was a situation to observe, analyze, and plan, not react emotionally. I sat down, staring at the screen, keeping my heartbeat under control. The message was simple, yet it cut everything off. No explanation, no hint of a return. I didn't reply. Instead, I reviewed every recent interaction, analyzing every detail of our conversations, every glance, every word. Something had shifted, and now it was time to assess. In the past months, I replayed small incidents I had dismissed, her brief silences, minor disagreements, moments of distance. They all formed a pattern that I had to read carefully, not to blame, but to understand her motives and strategy. Then came the second signal. Her mother tagged her in a social media post. A family photo, innocuous at first glance, but in this context, it became a subtle weapon, forcing me to react. It exposed a private situation to the public, creating pressure she didn't need to express directly. I noted it. No emotion, just analysis. I walked the city streets, maintaining physical and emotional distance. My mind was planning each move. How to respond, when to respond, how to maintain composure. Every step, every breath, measured, deliberate. I considered several scenarios. Calling immediately could escalate the situation, possibly involve her mother, and create public conflict. Remaining silent, observing, would allow the truth of her intentions to reveal itself. I chose the latter. This was not avoidance, it was calculated patience, calm and precise. I thought of our plans, promises, shared dreams over 2 years. Painful as it was, I couldn't let emotions control me. I compartmentalized the hurt, the disappointment, the confusion. All were tools for strategy, not impulsive reaction. Time passed, night fell, and I continued walking, observing. I allowed events to unfold on her terms while keeping control of myself. I analyzed, I noted, I prepared for every possible scenario, her reaching out, or the worst-case outcomes. Every time the phone buzzed, I glanced at it, but didn't pick up. I knew a hasty response could be a mistake. Silence, for now, was power. It gave me time to observe, understand, and prepare for any move. As the city quieted, I stopped on the sidewalk, looking at distant streetlights. The pain was there, but managed, transformed into strategy. I would let her experience distance, reveal her true intentions, while I remained calm, composed, in full control. It was the only way to preserve dignity, maintain psychological leverage. In the end, I realized this relationship, if it survived, wouldn't be decided by temporary emotions, but by how each of us strategically handled high-pressure situations, and I was ready for every scenario. Silence was power. Observation was strength. And in the quiet darkness of the city, I felt fully in control, at least for now. The next morning, I didn't text or call. Instead, I opened my phone and scrolled through her notifications with calm precision, analyzing every detail, the timing of her posts, the tone, the people interacting, even the posts she had liked before. Everything was data. Any emotional reaction would ruin the plan. I considered the possibility that she was testing me. Part of her probably wanted to see how I would react to her, simply to measure my patience. I didn't fall for the trap. Every move I made was calculated, measured, and deliberate. No impulsiveness, no letting emotions take the wheel. While at work, a colleague texted me, noticing I looked tired. I smiled faintly and replied briefly. Nobody knew I was navigating a delicate situation, observing, analyzing, preparing every next move. In my mind, I ran through every scenario. She might reach out, continue to stay silent, or her mother might intervene again. I steeled myself for all possibilities, keeping my composure intact. In the afternoon, I walked through the park near my apartment, letting my thoughts wander. This was no longer a simple emotional issue. It was a strategic game where every gesture, every text, every behavior was data. I observed my surroundings, couples passing by, friends gathered on benches, glances from strangers. Everything reminded me to stay focused, to remain calm. Every step, every breath was intentional, part of a larger strategy. As night fell, social media pinged with a new notification. A mutual friend had commented on her mother's post, emphasizing that she's finding herself. It didn't affect me directly, but it was another piece of the puzzle. The world was watching, judging, and indirectly applying pressure. I noted it all, without reacting, without showing emotions, simply analyzing. Back at home, I poured a cup of coffee and sat by the window, staring out at the dimly lit street. I reminded myself that every next move had to be strategic, calm, and calculated. I made a detailed list. When to reach out, what to ask, what to avoid, how to control the conversation. Every detail mattered. Nothing could be overlooked. Meanwhile, the emotional sting lingered quietly, but I compartmentalized it, separating it from decision. I realized a strange kind of power. By not reacting emotionally, I was in control. Every step, every action, every thought had a purpose. I knew that when the right moment came, I would have complete information to make the final decision, whether this relationship continued or not. As the night deepened, I wandered through the streets, observing distant lights, passing cars, random footsteps. I imagined every possible scenario, her coming back, us talking calmly, or a calculated argument. I mapped out in my mind every step, every word, every possible reaction. Everything was under control. I stopped in front of a closed coffee shop, watching the signs reflected in the glass, seeing my own image dimly lit. In that moment, I realized silence and observation were power, and sometimes letting her experience the distance was the best way to understand her true motives. I wasn't losing control. I was accumulating leverage, waiting for the right moment to act in the darkness. I felt something strange, not anger, not fear, but pure psychological power. I had chosen not to react emotionally, not to let feelings dictate my actions, and that was the strongest strategy at the moment. The distance was hers, but I controlled myself. And I knew that when the time was right, every decision would be made with full information, precisely, and in my favor. Night had fallen, the city wrapped in silence, but I didn't head straight home. I walked through the empty streets, noting every sound, the rustle of the wind, the faint creak of windows, distant footsteps of late-night wanderers. Every detail became data, mapped carefully in my mind. Each step echoed lightly on the pavement, each breath measured, as if keeping time with a plan unfolding in real life. I opened my phone again, scrolling through the latest notifications from her. A single like, a brief comment, a post she ignored. Every signal mattered. I did not react, did not show emotion. I understood clearly. Acting too soon would break the strategy. Timing was everything. Every move had to be deliberate, precise, and purposeful. In my mind, scenarios unfolded one after another. She might reach out. We might meet and talk calmly. Or a tense, calculated confrontation could take place. I imagined every word, every pause, every glance. Every slight smile or furrowed brow-edge gesture could shift the outcome. This was no longer a simple story of love. It was a psychological strategy game. Patience, observation, and calculation would determine who held the advantage. The hollow ache of loneliness and emptiness crept in, but I separated it from my actions. I observed it as an external phenomenon, refusing to let it dictate my behavior. I reminded myself, true power is not in winning arguments or commanding attention. True power lies in controlling oneself, maintaining calm, and waiting for the right moment to act. Passing a closed coffee shop, the warm light inside reflected a faint image of me on the glass. I paused, studying my reflection. Every action must have purpose. No detail can be ignored, I thought. I remembered past moments when emotional reactions cost me control, and the memory of those failures still burned quietly. This time, I wouldn't make the same mistake. Back home, I poured a strong cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the yellow streetlights and the occasional shadow of a passerby. I began drafting a detailed plan for every potential scenario. If she texts, how I would respond. If she remained silent, what I would do to maintain control. If a third party intervened, how I would handle it. Every possibility anticipated, every step intentional. No detail overlooked. I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaled deeply, and felt clarity spreading through every thought and motion. I sensed a strange power knot, outward, but psychological, rooted in self-control. I had chosen distance, yet it did not weaken me. On the contrary, it made me stronger, preparing for the final move. The ultimate decision in this relationship. I imagined every possible encounter, her messaging late at night, a calm meet-up at a cafe, a strategic conversation where every pause, every word carried weight. I mapped out each step, each sentence, each possible reaction. Everything was under control. I realized that silence was not passivity, was power. I did not let her emotions dictate mine. I observed, collected information, and waited. Hours passed, the city quiet around me, and I sat still by the window, reminding myself, when the right moment comes, every decision will be made with complete information, precise, and to my advantage. I felt strength coursing through each heartbeat, each breath. This was true power, power drawn from self-control, patience, and waiting. In the darkness, I felt an unusual but pure sense of authority. No anger, no fear, only clarity and absolute control. The distance was hers, but the power was mine. And when the moment arrives, I will hold all the information, make the final decision, and whatever the outcome, it will remain under my control. The following morning arrived quietly, the city moving at its usual pace, oblivious to the tension coiled inside me. I didn't reach for my phone immediately. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming before me, eyes scanning the room as if it held secret clues. Every decision, every move needed preparation. Reacting too early could unravel everything I had carefully built by mid-morning. A new notification appeared from her social media. Something small, almost insignificant. A story posted and immediately deleted. Most would ignore it, dismiss it as trivial. But I didn't. I noted the timing, the choice of words, the subtle hints in the image she had shared. It spoke volumes to someone paying attention. My mind catalogued every detail, running through possible interpretations. Was it a test, a provocation, or just a fleeting thought? I would not know yet, and that was precisely why I did not act. Patience was my weapon. At work, colleagues joked and chatted, oblivious to the storm inside me. One asked if I was tired. I smiled faintly, giving a short reply. To the outside world, I appeared composed, unaffected. But inside, my mind was a theater of strategy. I mentally rehearsed scenarios. If she reached out, I would remain calm, measured. If she stayed distant, I would hold my position, showing no vulnerability. If her family intervened, I would predict their moves, anticipating every possible angle. Every detail mattered. During lunch, I left the office and walked alone, observing the city around me. Couples passed by, friends laughed together, strangers glanced briefly before moving on. Each glance, each interaction was another reminder. Life moved forward around us. But I had chosen a different rhythm, one dictated by strategy, not impulse. Every movement, every step I took, became part of the mental framework I had constructed, calculated, deliberate, and precise by late afternoon. The tension was palpable, even to myself. I felt the ache of waiting, the subtle pull of uncertainty, yet I held my ground. I reviewed the potential responses again. If she texted, I would not reply immediately. I would measure my words, choose them carefully, and maintain control. Every message, every reaction would serve a purpose. Impulse had no place here. Every decision was deliberate, a piece of a larger plan, a carefully orchestrated game. That evening, I finally left my apartment to walk the streets again, seeking clarity in the quiet hum of the city. The streetlights reflected off wet asphalt, the occasional car passing through the night. I imagined encounters, the weight of conversations, the subtlest shifts in tone and expression. Every possible scenario played out in my mind, each more tense than the last. I wasn't afraid. I was focused. I didn't need emotion to guide me. I had reason, observation, and calculation. Returning home, I made another strong cup of coffee and settled by the window. I began a new mental checklist. If she initiated contact tonight, how would I respond without revealing weakness? If she continued to avoid me, how would I maintain the psychological edge? How would I react if others became involved, trying to manipulate or sway the situation? My mind catalogued everything, storing each piece like ammunition, ready for the decisive moment. The night deepened, and with it, the sense of control strengthened. I realized that the power of observation, the discipline of silence, and the restraint of action were more potent than any confrontation could ever be. By remaining calm, by keeping distance, I was not passive, I was accumulating leverage. Preparing for the moment where every choice I made would be deliberate, calculated, and decisive in that quiet darkness. I felt the unusual, intoxicating sensation of control, the understanding that while the situation itself was uncertain, my mind was precise, deliberate, and unshakable. The tension was rising, yes, but it served a purpose. Every heartbeat, every breath, every thought was aligned with a strategy designed to ensure that when the time came, I would act not out of impulse, but with complete mastery over the outcome. And in that moment, I knew the game was escalating. The next move would not be reactive. It would be strategic. I would choose when, where, and how the confrontation unfolded. I would hold the advantage, because in this silent, tense waiting, I had already won the most important battle, the battle for control. The next day arrived with a heavy stillness. I woke early, before the first light of dawn, and spent time quietly observing my phone. Every notification, every message, every interaction, I analyzed them meticulously, noting time, words, tone, and all the people involved. Every detail was a piece of the larger picture I was constructing. By mid-morning, she remained silent. No message, no sign, just an empty void. Most people would feel anxious, restless, or lose control, but not me. I understood clearly this silence was not a pause, but a test, an opportunity to consolidate my psychological power. In my mind, I ran through countless scenarios. She might reach out unexpectedly. We might meet without warning. A third party could get involved, or rumors could create pressure. I anticipated every possibility, analyzing each detail. If she seemed indifferent, I would remain calm. If she appeared suddenly, I would control the encounter. If her family intervened, I would respond in a way that kept all power in my hands. That afternoon, I decided to walk outside, moving slowly, each step deliberate, each footfall a metronome for my strategy. The surroundings came alive, couples having minor arguments, friends laughing, passing strangers, fleeting glances. Everything was data, a reminder of the subtle interactions in the real world. I listened, observed, and remembered. Not a single detail escaped my control. As sunset arrived, the city's vibrant glow reflected off the building windows, and I realized the next move had to be precise. I needed to prepare for the step that could change everything. Sitting on a park bench, I reopened my phone, examining notifications from the day. Every like, every comment, every story, view I calculated them all, leaving nothing to chance. Night fell, and tension reached its peak. A message from her appeared. I did not open it immediately. Instead, I sat still, eyes closed, taking a deep breath, observing the sensations in my body. A flicker of anticipation arose, but I did not let it control me. I knew that reacting too quickly would shatter my control. When the moment came, I would act but by my own rules, not by impulse. I opened the message slowly, analyzing every word, every period, every space. I measured my own reactions, calculated what could happen next. This conversation was no longer a matter of emotions. It was a mental battlefield where calm and strategy determined dominance in the darkness. I realized the true power. It was not in dominating, nor in confrontation. It was in self-control, observation, and waiting for the precise moment. I had prepared every scenario, every response, every action. No surprises, no loss of composure. When my next move unfolded, I would hold all the power. I looked out the window, streetlights passing by, imagining every possible scenario. She might reply, we might meet in person, or a subtle confrontation could occur. Every situation I had rehearsed in my mind, every word, every glance, every pause meticulously planned. Everything was under control. In that moment, I felt a strange but pure sense of authority, no anger, no fear, only clarity, focus, and absolute control. The distance was hers, but the power was mine. And when the right moment arrived, I would act. And every decision, regardless of outcome, would remain completely under my control. The next morning, I woke early as usual. The city was still shrouded in morning mist, but in my mind, a map of scenarios and a detailed strategy played out. Everything unfolded in silence, yet my brain worked relentlessly, measuring, predicting, analyzing. The morning passed, and she still hadn't sent a message or left a sign. This distance didn't unsettle me. On the contrary, it sharpened my focus. I knew she was observing, possibly testing my reactions. But I refused to fall into the trap of emotion. Every moment of silence was an accumulation of power at work. Colleagues laughed, chatted, and asked questions, but I responded minimally. They had no idea that inside me, every detail was being analyzed. The timing of her potential messages, the frequency of her interactions, even the people she engaged with. Every piece of data mattered. Every reaction was prepared in advance. By the afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. The sunlight had dimmed, shadows stretching across the streets. I observed everything: couples talking, passerby glances, subtle shifts in daily activities. Every detail was data, helping me prepare for my next move. I knew that when I acted, I would need absolute control. Night came, and my phone vibrated. A message from her. I didn't open it immediately. I stood in the middle of the room, inhaling deeply, feeling my heartbeat, every sensation, and observing my thoughts. This was no longer a simple matter of emotions. This was a psychological battlefield, where the calmest, most calculated, and patient person would hold the advantage. I opened the message slowly, reading each word, each period, analyzing the intent behind her words. In my mind, multiple scenarios were already prepared. Respond immediately, maintain distance, or meet in person. Each choice carried strategic weight. I knew that any impulsive reaction would cost me control, and I would not allow that after reading the message. I drafted a detailed list of actions. If she wanted to meet, I would choose the location, timing, and control the encounter. If she continued to maintain distance, I would preserve my advantage with strategic silence. If her family intervened, I would respond in a way that maximized my power. Every detail was calculated. Nothing overlooked. I stood by the window, watching the streetlights, imagining every possible scenario, a tense conversation. Eyes locked, words weighed carefully, pauses wielded like weapons. I realized that true power did not come from speaking loudly or acting aggressively, but from observation, patience, and absolute calm in the darkness. I felt strength flowing through every heartbeat, every breath. The distance was hers, but the control was mine. When the right moment arrived, I would hold all the information, manipulate the situation, and make the final decision with complete precision. Nothing could make me lose control. This was the pinnacle of psychological power, pure, cold, and entirely strategic power. That night, I stood by the window, my hand resting on the cool glass, watching the streetlights cast faint golden streaks across the wet sidewalks. The city moved on as usual. The soft hum of traffic, a few hurried pedestrians, familiar sounds as if nothing had happened. But in my mind, everything was different. Every small movement in the world around me was recorded, analyzed, and mapped into an intricate strategy. I knew she was watching, testing my limits, but I was no longer the person who could be shaken. Every impulsive emotion had been stripped away, replaced by meticulous observation and strategic calculation. The next morning, her message arrived. I didn't rush to open it. Instead, I closed my eyes, drew a deep breath, feeling my heartbeat, the tension in my muscles, and the wave of latent emotions beneath the surface. I imagined every possible scenario she might want to meet. She might maintain her silence, or her family might intervene unexpectedly. Each situation was carefully analyzed. I would decide the location, the timing, every single word of our conversation. I would control the rhythm, guide the gaze, and every pause would be a weapon. Nothing would be left to chance. Throughout the next week, I trained my patience. Every message she sent, every subtle cue from her friends or family was logged. I observed how she typed, the words she chose, even the pauses she made before responding. All of it was data. Every tiny detail was integrated into a larger strategy. This was no longer a matter of simple emotions. It was a psychological battlefield where the calmest, most calculated, and patient person would hold absolute power. Finally, the day came when we met. I arrived on time, entering the cafe with a calm posture, my gaze steady but perceptive. She looked at me, surprise flickering in her eyes, along with the dawning realization that I was no longer someone easily controlled. Every greeting, every smile, I observed carefully. The timing of her eye contact, her subtle breaths, the way she arranged the glass before her. Every gesture carried meaning, and I knew how to read them like a detailed map. The conversation began. I didn't speak too much, didn't rush, yet every word was carefully measured. Pauses became tools, glances became signals. When she stopped speaking, I didn't react immediately. I inferred the meaning, gauged the potential impact, and planned my response. One maintained absolute composure, each heartbeat, each breath under my control. Every smile, every frown was noted and calculated. Gradually I realized the balance of power had completely shifted. No impulsiveness, no anxiety, only calm and calculated moves. She tried to test boundaries, asked probing questions, attempted subtle challenges, but I remained unshaken. Each time she tried to assert control, I simply adjusted the rhythm of the conversation, guiding it according to my strategy. The distance, the earlier tests, the strategic silences, everything had now been transformed into my advantage. When the meeting ended, I didn't need to raise my voice, act aggressively, or display strength. Simply by patiently observing, staying composed, and strategizing every move, I had gained full control. I understood that true power does not come from loud words or impulsive actions. It comes from calm observation, patience, and waiting for the perfect moment. On the way home, I walked slowly, feeling every step, every heartbeat. From now on, every decision, every move was in my hands. Nothing could break this control. Every breath, every heartbeat was proof of the absolute power of composure. When the final moment to make a decision arrived, I would hold all the information, manipulate every situation, and act with perfect precision. In the darkness of the room, I smiled faintly. The distance was hers, but controlled the entirety of power was mine. I had proven that true strength does not come from loud actions, but from meticulous observation, patience, and absolute coldness. This was the pinnacle of psychological power, force completely cold, strategic and unshakable, where the calmest person always holds everything. And in that moment, one simple but ultimate truth became clear. When you control yourself, you control everything.